some point you have to have a cut-off point in history.
Yeah, you do have to have a cut-off point in history.
Yet.
I agree with that, but not just yet, because a lot of things that affect Black people in this country.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Britain Politics. Guys, a TalkTV panel has erupted into a furious debate over Lloyd's of London and its reported 52 million reparations payout. What started as a discussion quickly became much more heated, and it only gets more intense from here.
Does Oprah Winfrey, as a black woman in America, a multimillionaire billionaire, does she need to have reparations being paid?
You'll hear how she responds to that point shortly. But once the discussion turns to women's rights, the entire question of who should receive compensation for historical wrongs is suddenly put under serious pressure, and you're about to see that debate unfold right in front of you. Before we play the clip, share this video with anyone who needs to see this. Leave a like and subscribe if you're tired of seeing these arguments go completely unchallenged. Right, let's go back to the moment where it all began.
Lloyd's of London are set to invest £52 million in, I say invest, it's not going to invest, is it? Reparations to racial equality. Guy, I don't know who wrote this. Let's just completely ignore that. They're going to pay £52 million in reparations for their significant role in the slave trade. That's a bit easier. This comes after an 18-month review found that the insurance market was playing a quite central role to the maintenance of slavery. Basically, they were insuring the ships carrying the African slaves across the Atlantic. Well, joining me to discuss this is broadcaster and journalist Afia Hagan, regular here on TalkTV, of course. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm not a fan of reparations. I'm not entirely sure that people in the 21st century should be apologising for and trying to make good for horrible things that happened in the past, because the past, pretty much until 100 years ago, was horrible for virtually everyone. Some people had it more badly than others, but pretty much everyone had a horrible, horrific, terrible life. And I'm not entirely sure what reparations do to solve that. Why do you think this is a good idea? 52 million quid.
Well, the thing is, the UK government only finished paying back compensation to slave owners. So that was owners of enslaved people who lost their commodities when slavery was abolished in 1833. We only finished paying that back in 2000.
It cost the country a fortune to abolish slavery.
For £300 million. £20 million in 1833, £300 million in today's money. So, and at that point, that was compensation paid back to slave owners. But at no point has any reparations been paid back. And I don't just believe that reparations should be money. I think it should be actions as well. But no reparations have been paid back to enslaved people and their descendants.
Well, there can't be to enslaved people because they died a long time ago.
Of course, and millions of African people died in the journey trying to just make it to the Americas, to the Caribbean, wherever.
Yeah.
And reparations, the definition of it is redressing gross violations of human rights, which enslaving millions of people was.
Clearly.
And it's not just about the money. It's also about redressing inequalities that exist today, which are a hangover, if you will.
And certainly, look, America,
slavery.
until very, very recently, I mean, only, in our lifetime, well, certainly my lifetimes, the people did not have equality as a result of that. Different situation here in the UK. We didn't import slavery. People who live in this country are people who have chosen to live in this country. But you're in a situation where, look, it was black Africans who sold other black Africans to white Europeans to sell to plantations in America. It was an appalling abomination of a crime. It has happened in every society, every empire, throughout history. It is still happening now. Far more black Africans were sold by Arab slave traders to go east. All of it was horrific and awful. Thank God we helped abolish it. I think Britain should stand proud in the world for the fact we were the first empire to say, no, we're going to abolish this. They paid the slave owners because that was the quickest and best way of stopping this trade. What is the point of paying reparations now to, say, for instance, a young black woman like yourself? In what way do you need to be given recompense for what happened to perhaps some of your ancestors many years ago? Does Oprah Winfrey, as a black woman in America, a multimillionaire billionaire, does she need to have reparations being paid?
I think the point of reparations, like I said, it's about redressing this gross violation of human rights, which is something
you
that
can't
we
redress it.
But
it happened.
But that's exactly. But it's something that we, like you said, we cannot deny that has happened.
No one's denying it.
And there has to be some sort of compensation paid. We can't just sort of carry on like we are now and not redressing the inequalities, which are the hangover from slavery that exists now. So basically, you have inequalities in the NHS, in the police
inequalities
service.
in the NHS.
Yeah, huge.
Because of slavery.
But
the slave trade is responsible for inequalities in the NHS.
The slave trade is responsible for the institutionalized racism that we have in different institutions in the United Kingdom. And I'm only
Why don't we ask
about
for reparations
from
African states that now exist now, or who were responsible for selling, rounding up, capturing other African people and selling them to white Europeans? Why don't we ask those states for reparations? Why don't we ask the Italians to pay for the invasions of the Romans and the enslavery of many people, the Celts and others here in the UK? I'm thinking, my family, I mean, this isn't a government payout, it's Lloyd's of London. They made millions from insuring ships carrying slaves. They literally insured, they regarded human beings, because they were black, as cargo, as cattle,
as commodity.
Effectively, they were not considered human. It's a disgusting thing. The world has changed now. Britain is part of the reason why that changed. What on earth is the purpose of those reparations? Nobody living today is directly affected by slavery.
That's untrue, because, like I said,
by that slavery, there are people in slavery.
Because we still have the inequalities, which are the hangover of slavery. We still have the institutionalized racism in different sectors of society, which was started by having slavery in the first place, which was started by regarding people of African descent as cattle, as commodity, and using them as things rather than people.
Now, to be clear, nobody on this panel, including the host, is suggesting that slavery did not happen or that it was anything other than horrific. That part is not being challenged. What is being acknowledged is the historical point Afua makes. Lloyd's insured ships involved in the slave trade, and the compensation paid at the time went to slave owners rather than the enslaved people. But the question being raised is a much broader one. Should a company today, and ultimately its customers, be expected to carry that financial responsibility nearly 2 centuries later? So where do you stand on it? Should modern companies be held financially responsible for the actions of predecessors from the 18th century? Let us know your view in the comments.
About reparations for women. Women until about sort of 70, 80 years ago pretty much had no rights. We had the same rights as children, such as children had rights. We were basically owned by our fathers and then owned by our husbands. In my lifetime, it's been legal for men to beat their wives and rape their wives. When are we getting our reparations from all the men? Because we're living under that subjugation. I mean, it's at some point you have to have a cut-off point in history.
Yeah, you do have to have a cut-off point in history.
Yet.
I agree with that, but not just yet, because a lot of things that affect black people in this country.
Once again, this is the kind of discussion that would rarely be allowed to continue for this long on mainstream television without being interrupted by an advert break. So here's the question I want to put directly to you. If we accept that there can be a historical cut-off point when discussing women's rights, should the same principle apply when it comes to reparations? Let me know your answer in the comments. The strongest response could be pinned. If you found this discussion interesting, give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with others.